Hello there, this is Steve here in Sydney of the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com, where you can get divine activation of your divine spark in just 20 minutes with immediate physical evidence. You'll know something's changed in just 20 minutes when you do the beginner's tour, and within a few days you'll get some vivid messaging dreams, and you'll end up with an internal mentoring voice, kundalini rise, and all sorts of wonderful things. And it's literally a sleigh ride through a magic forest that awakens you to what you really are. You're a lot more than you think. So I'll now end this because this is just another commercial that you can all ignore like you do all the other commercials. So, can I just say a bit more about what I said in the last video, which was that there seems to be some great malaise crippling the Western world, and it seems to be tens of millions of people who are physically grown up. They drive motor cars, they have children, they have babies, they have jobs, they operate computers, yet they seem to have the emotional, intellectual maturity of a 7-year-old. And it's not just a few, it seems to be tens of millions. Many of them vote a Democrat in the United States, no matter if there's 125,000 WikiLeaks emails tying Hillary Clinton to gross corruption and criminality, and the fact that criminality has infiltrated the United States government for about the last 30 years. This will not dissuade Democrat supporters from voting for them no matter what, which begins to make you think, are they able to do perception of evidence, or are they evidence-blind people, unable to, do they just make all their decisions based on emotion and sloganising? It certainly looks that way. Now, I'd like to know, and I don't know if I can ever elucidate this, and that is, have we always had tens of millions of immature people who don't know how to think and are absolutely outraged when they don't get their way when they're 25, 35 years old? Years ago, the only sort of thoughts we had that were ever publicised were in newspapers and television, so you never got to know what a crowd of people was actually thinking. They kept it to themselves. But now with social media, with Twitter and Facebook and all that, people put their darkest musings online and leave it there, seemingly unaware of the dangerous nature of it, the vicious, cruel nature of it, and how it shows their true innermost sentiments. And there seems to be an outbreak of it all over the world just because Donald Trump got elected unexpectedly, despite Hillary Clinton's most energetic cheating, and very obviously proven cheating. And she stole apparently 6 states or something, all on the west coast of America, and it was done by the sudden appearance of 500,000 votes. And it was picked up. Some score watchers said something very strange. 6 states have suddenly got 500,000 extra votes. What's going on? That's why Hillary Clinton hasn't appealed the vote wanting a recount, because it would reveal her criminality. But despite all this, tens of millions of people are absolutely outraged and cannot recover from the fact that Donald Trump got elected and their childhood hero, so it seems, Hillary Clinton, didn't get elected. Now, I'm beginning to wonder now whether we have bred recently, in the last 20, 30 years, a whole crop of under-functioning people with grown-up bodies, large physical bodies, adult bodies, but with the mind of a 7-year-old. My explanation has been that something's disrupting the maturation process of their brains around the beginning of puberty, about 12, 13. Previous to that, you have a mind like a tape recorder where you remember everything you're told and you believe everything you are told. It's only around 12, 13 when maturation hormones start re-architecting your brain to start your flight to adulthood that you start saying, well, even if that's true, I'm not going to go with it because it offends me so much. I'm never going to support that. There should be a law against it. That's the beginning of your adult personality. Now, what could be the cause of maturation hormones not happening to all these liberal supporters who still have very childish, open-ended ideas? childish behaviours of the most vicious and infantile nature. Well, I'm wondering if it's something in the environment such as fluoride in the water or glyphosate, perhaps in the food chain. It's now rising. Glyphosate, in case you don't know, is Roundup in the hardware store. It's in all our food. It makes it weed killer proof, should I say. They got away with using it for 50, 60, 70 years until recently, when they kept saying, oh, well, it doesn't affect animals because it exploits the shikimate pathway in plants, you see. And being as we're not all walking plants, we don't have to do a lot of testing of it, you see, because it only affects plant cells. Well, guess what? 50% of our gut bacteria are plant cells, and glyphosate, that is Roundup, kills our gut bacteria. And I'll tell you one thing that comes out of our gut bacteria: serotonin, a brain compound. There may be a whole lot of other brain compounds come out of our gut bacteria, and we just don't know how long-term ingestion of glyphosate, that's Roundup, the weed killer, in our food chain, affects our brain maturations in our children. Remember, there's been other things that block hormones as well. It's been noticed that children, little girls, now menstruate earlier and earlier and earlier. There are estrogen mimicking poisons in the environment, and there are hormone blockers. Remember the one called phthalate, which is the hardening compound used in clear plastic milk bottles for children. You know the babies drink out of them, clear plastic. It's hardened with phthalate, which is thought to be a hormone blocker, which has been responsible for deformities in boys' genitals when they're born. That's on the increase, you see. Now, you mix these difficulties with ever-increasing amounts of vaccines at an earlier and earlier age, and a whole bunch of other things we don't know about in the food chain, plus GMOs. It could be that we are actually producing a nation of adults with infant brains. I put it to you as an analogy. It is claimed that the Zika mosquito bite causes a disease which causes shrunken heads. I put it to you, there may be some agents at work, a chemical, hormonal, or something in the food chain that prevents the brains of some people maturing around 12, 13, you see. So that's what scares me, because it would seem to be only be getting worse. And one of the outcomes of this is the absolutely amazing number of people who want to kill Trump because he won the election. Despite the fact, no one's bothered to look it up, it's 5 years in jail and a $250,000 fine if you are convicted of making violent utterances about the president. And people are doing it on Facebook, on Twitter. The press corps is leading the charge. The press corps, of all things, is leading the charge to justify the assassination of Donald Trump. It is truly amazing. Do you recall the fracas recently? Just the other day, Donald Trump slipped out to a restaurant to have dinner, a steak dinner or something. And it was discovered that he slipped away from the press and Secret Service and everybody, and just having a quiet dinner somewhere. And two things happened. The press went off their brain because he'd escaped them, and they said they had every right and a desperate need to cover him, you see. That was thought to be a protective statement, like they thought they were the Secret Service or something. But that was a misunderstanding. And the other thing is, there's now calls from social media to close down the restaurant, because guess what? The owners of the restaurant are black, and apparently the restaurant's in a black area. So the black owners of the restaurant have been told they're traitors to their own race for feeding a white man, even if he's president of the United States. They're traitors to their own race, you see. So suddenly we now get an insight into what the left are really doing. All the Democrat supporters are actually, all the things they accuse us of, they are projecting from their own dark, underdeveloped, vicious, infantile personalities. They call us racist, when actually it's them making an innocent steak dinner into a tour de force of racism. It's absolutely outrageous. There's advice now that a boycott should be placed upon the restaurant for betraying the black race that they belong to and actually serving a steak dinner to a white man. Can you believe that? Now, that's a very unsatisfactory and very nasty revelation from the left wing of society these days. Now, the other thing is that the initial furor about how he slipped away from the press, they said they needed to cover him. They had to cover him, you see. That was the word used, funny phrase, cover. We have to cover the president at all times, you see. So that was taken to believe that maybe the press are deluded and they think they're the Secret Service guarding the president or something, you see. But a few days later, it comes out reported by Bloomberg, MSM, mainstream media, what they actually mean. And I've actually got it here. I'll show it to you. So I've got it here on my phone. I'll just read it out to you and I'll try and make a panel of it for you so you get it in its entirety. But when he slipped out of the restaurant, Bloomberg's John Heilemann complained, it's not because we're trying to bother the president, but because it's our job to cover him. And in the world in which we live, Kennedy assassination, 9/11, Reagan assassination attempt, we have to be there to cover his assassination attempt, brackets. That's what he means, right? Okay? So, they were miffed because they weren't there to cover his assassination in the restaurant. So, foregone conclusion, talk about what a Freudian giveaway that is, for goodness sake. As usual from the press, a very shallow and very naive explanation. If something happens to him, Heilemann said, not completely coherently is the observation, the public deserves to know the moment as quickly as possible that something has happened in case he's incapacitated, you see. This is wishful thinking of the press, that they want to be there to film his assassination, film the holes in his body, the blood coming out, and the fact that he couldn't be resuscitated has got to be made exclusively known to the leaders of the MSM so they can trumpet it, pun intended. Of course, the journalist reporting the journalist, points out that you don't really need the press anymore because everyone in the restaurant's got phone cameras and any event such as that would be on YouTube within minutes. So the press are really giving themselves a role they don't need anymore. Citizen journalists could probably do the job better. But that's the attitude of the press, that they want to be there in case he's assassinated. Wishful think, wishful think, wishful think. Oh, if only I could get the scoop, for goodness sake. So the press is run by people like that. We seem to have a whole class of people bred in seemingly vast numbers, and the elite of that class seems to become pressmen, and they all advocate basically the assassination of Donald Trump. The press believe they can control who should be president, who shouldn't be, who should be elected, who shouldn't be. And the political classes have depended on that level of press control for decades, but it's now over with citizen journalism. The example given in that restaurant thing where the press think they have a right to be there, but the restaurant would be full of citizen journalists, all with high-definition camera phones, and we really don't need the press anymore to report news. Citizen journalists can report it themselves and do a better job. So no one's got the exclusive right to attend the president in case of a juicy assassination scene that they're wishing for every night when they go to bed. But doesn't this say so much about the spiteful tens of millions of people we have produced in our society? I'm wondering whether it's chemical poisoning that makes people so unhinged, as unable to accept democracy. It seems to these tens of millions of unhinged people that they haven't read basic history, which is that democracy is about the best of all the bad systems, the worst of all the bad systems, depending on how you read Winston Churchill. But in case you don't know, previous to democracy, the only way to change government was basically abdication, forced abdication, assassination, coup, civil war, insurrection, or invasion. Those are the only ways to get rid of a bad government, okay? So it so ruined Greek civilization that one fellow in ancient Greece spent 5 days walking up and down a beach and decided it would be better and more stable and allow greater prosperity for all if everyone voted and elected a leading party to govern the nation, and everyone would abide by the decision no matter how good or bad it seemed, because that was the will of the common people. So that's the basic idea of democracy, which it would seem all the left-wing people today that we have by the tens of millions produce don't seem to understand. Do they really want permanent bloodshed civil war? Do they really still want government death squads disappearing dissidents like they did in Argentina, where they used to drop dissident students out of aeroplanes from 30,000 feet? Do you really want to go back to that? That's pre-democracy, okay? That's cruel, vicious dictatorships. Try reading The Prince. It might educate yourself if you don't know. It's something to read about. It's about how you stay in power. And basically it comes down to the cruelest princes stay in power the longest. And the nicest princes have the least time in power. That's before democracy came along, you see. And that was observations made by Machiavelli, who was a top public service negotiator who simply had to negotiate trade treaties, and he just noticed that the harshest princes that came to visit him once a year lasted the longest in power, and the nicest ones had the shortest span in power, okay? So do you want to go back to that sort of stuff, all you idiot left-wingers out there who believe in insurrection, permanent warfare, bloodshed, disappearances, mass graves and all that stuff? Do you want to go back to that? The nightmare you can read about what they did in Argentina and all sorts of places? Is that what you really want when you can't have your own way? Goodness sake. What to do with the controlled press, which is owned by about 10 people around the world or 20 people around the world? They all want the same thing, total control. That's all they want, just total control of what you think about. Well, they've been destroyed by citizen journalists and the internet and WikiLeaks, a remarkable 1-2 combination which has basically destroyed the credibility of the mainstream media. And they've been so hostile and so in love with lying that they've run away from the truth repeatedly and got all their own journalists completely on the wrong foot. And we've got people contemplating suicide, going to Canada and that sort of stuff. But we noticed none of them actually go to Canada and none of them actually commit suicide. So it's just spiteful rhetoric from people basically throwing tantrums and throwing their toys out of the pram, so to speak. So what can we do about the mainstream media encouraging people to think this way? Well, Brother Nathanael in one video, I'll link it to this video, Brother Nathanael in one video says that Donald Trump should be nationalising all the main media wings, NBC, ABC, CBS, etc., and with 51% control, and have watchdog committees to make sure that they're abiding somewhere near the truth. You've got to get within cooey of the truth when you write a news article and call it news. That's Brother Nathanael's suggestion. I don't know if Donald Trump would be going to go that far. He'd be making massive inroads back into capitalism and free enterprise and all that sort of tripe. But there's a need, if you're claiming to be producing a public service, that you don't produce a public disservice, which is what the mainstream media has been for the last 20, 30 years in the Western world. So Donald Trump could be the catalyst that corrects mainstream media, and we actually go back to some re-regulation, which we seem to need because self-regulation doesn't work. That began in the 1960s. Self-regulation doesn't work. Otherwise, people show their worst criminality, and that's been shown in the mainstream media in this last election in America, you see, and it's mimicked all around the world. But it has given birth to, you can see shoots in the soil now in all the great nations of the world. There's Trump's are going to be picked out by crowds of people who say he's the one, he's a successful person outside mainstream politics, he's not an insider, and he's the one for us. The Trump formula is already known, and there's Trumps waiting in the wings, I'm sure. We don't seem to have any in Australia. The closest we've got is Pauline Hanson, and she is really, although she has a lot of good ideas, she's not a good talking head on the television, so she'll probably not get there. They need someone who's a better presenter and better speaker, though her ideas are basically sound. Old-fashioned, she talks about getting rid of the United Nations and that stuff and making up our own rules. And Donald Trump might go that far, I don't know. He's throwing the TPP overboard. I'm very glad to hear that. But we'll see how far we can roll back the New World Order. Already the New World Order has said they're going to start opposing Donald Trump. There's official moves to block relocalisation. But in case you don't know, relocalisation is the answer, because the way you disperse money through the economy to people is to have jobs for them all, by which you give them a weekly salary, and for a fair day's work they get a fair day's pay, and that's an honest way of giving money out to people. The alternative is to give them dull money to sit at home, and if it's not enough money, they do what a lot of English people do, say in Scotland, they become part-time drug dealers to pay all the bills. That's where the Western world is headed unless we reintroduce manufacturing and useful work in our countries. You can't concentrate all manufacturing and all industry into one nation called China. There is no economic model for the world to work like that. It just can't work. It's a model for failure. Now, in light of recent historical events, with the success of WikiLeaks destroying the mainstream media and identifying Hillary Clinton as a very clear and present danger to society and to democracy and to the US government itself, can I almost playfully suggest, but not entirely playfully, suggest that all the emails of the White House should be put out in the public domain maybe every 12 months or every 2 years or something. Because I am astonished at the lack of wisdom in the email people in this whole circus. And that is, when I worked in a phone company years and years and years ago, we were told, don't be too candid, whatever you write. Don't dash it off. Think about what you're sending before you hit the send button. And do think what your email is going to look like if it turns up on the front page of a newspaper. I was told that in the 1980s. Yet, the US government people, from the White House down at least, the Department of Justice and the FBI and all that, they seem to diarise their criminality in over 800,000 emails. Podesta's organising his paedophile ring. Is it Comet Pizza or Comet Ping Pong Pizza Parlour, which is all code for pedophilia. That's all mixed. He's mixed his personal life in with government business, for goodness sake, through multiple administrations going right back to Clinton, the first Clinton. So maybe to keep people on their toes and try and stay reasonably honest, maybe they should be told that all your emails will be dumped out into the public domain every 12 months. That is my not so playful suggestion. So it seems that a lot of people in this criminal cabal that's hijacked the US government for some 30 years has been naively thinking they could get away with typing things that no one would ever see in emails because they're all using private servers. Did you know that Barack Obama used a private server too? So did Rahm Emanuel. Now, Hillary Clinton asked for advice from former Secretary of State Colin Powell on how to evade government knowledge of what she was typing in emails, and he got some advice. She got some advice from him, and he said, tread very carefully, because, it's whatever you type, it really is government business. So I'm warning you, tread very carefully. Words to the effect, I wish you hadn't asked me. But from that conversation, she got the idea of a private email server and advice from somebody else. The email is there. between her and Colin Powell. So I think it's amazing that their addiction to emails has got them all basically convicted, because they've diarised their criminality in immense detail. I know emails are fun to do and we all like doing them, but every little thing they do, all their reasoning, all their criminality is detailed. They've written it, they can't deny it. None of them have ever said, oh, that's all a fake email, WikiLeaks is leaking fake emails. No one's ever said that. Everyone knows straight away, yeah, that's my email. People have been sacked over the contents of WikiLeaks emails, you see. So, truly amazing it is that all these people naively thought, because they had a login and a password, that somehow all their emails would be private. But they don't seem to know that the NSA is the internet. The whole internet runs through the NSA buildings, and every keystroke that you type goes down a hole in a big hole in the ground in Utah, and every keystroke on the internet is recorded in so many terabits per second. So there's nothing private on the internet anywhere at all. I'm astonished that people in the US government didn't know this. I am absolutely astonished. But it would seem to me that outing all the emails every 12 or 24 months would be a good way to keep people on the straight and narrow, and just keep reminding them over and over again that whatever you write is going to turn up in newspaper headlines one day, so how do you want it to read? It's a really simple solution and enables the citizenry to supervise the upper echelons of power. It might be a wonderful addition to the old Greek idea of democracy, because the secrecy has got to such a toxic level, it's just about ruined the US government for some 30 years. And it could do with some reform, I think, and email releases is a good way to go. WikiLeaks has proven its worth. So, Steve here, and over and out.